Jaylen Brown with the flush. Tatum the drive. Tatum the finish. It is banner 18. The mission commanded is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with an episode of You Got Boston. And really excited to be able to make some predictions today. That's going to be the theme. I'm going to make 10 predictions for the 2024-2025 Celtics season, and then we can go back to this later on and see how many I got right. Probably I will get some of these wrong. But for those of you that haven't tuned in before, this is a podcast specifically focused on the Boston Celtics. I cover the team for Celtics blog, for SB Nation, and for CLNS Media. Oftentimes doing segments with Bobby Manning, but also I do lots of writing and coverage for SB Nation, so you can check out some of my stories there. I also cover the WNBA, so we're just about a week and a half away from WNBA playoffs tipping off. Highly recommend that those of you who have not yet tuned in, tune in. We've got some good basketball to watch in the meantime as you wait for the Celtics season to start. And Media Day, we have an official date for it. It's September 24th. So 2 weeks from yesterday is going to be the first day that I actually get to report to you all, not from my bedroom. So very excited about that. There's been some cool in-person things as well. So it hasn't been a completely dead period. I mentioned I saw Joe Mazzulla in Providence about a week and a half ago. He was presenting the Larry O'Brien trophy there. So that was pretty cool. And then Jayson Tatum has been kind of making the rounds with his new book, going to an event for that as well. So it's been an exciting time. I think that it's obviously a little bit slower now. We're a few weeks removed from the Olympics, the draft, summer league, and all that. So it's time to look ahead. It's time to look ahead towards the 2024-2025 season. And I don't like to speculate. I don't like to make predictions, generally speaking, but none of these are overly ambitious. So I figured I'd just put them out there. You can let me know, sound off below, which of these you agree with, disagree with, and we'll see how many I get right. I do try to avoid them, but I feel like I was so right about so many predictions last year that I wish I had them all in like one episode. Now I'm going to jinx it and get these all wrong. But in any case, I just wanted to give you guys some of my thoughts heading into this upcoming season. And then I have an exciting guest coming up. We're going to have Peyton Pritchard's college coach on the show next week. So very excited about that. We're going to maybe get a little bit of perspective on whether Peyton could shoot half-court shots in college, whether that was something that you noticed, his work ethic, and other things that a college coach notices will make a successful NBA player. And if there's anything you want asked in that interview, whether it's about Peyton Pritchard or else, something else for Dana, Pritchard's college coach, feel free to send me a message on Twitter when we can try to add it to our interview. It's going to be myself, my dad, and Dana, who is Peyton Pritchard's coach, and my dad and Dana are actually college teammates. So I always say I actually have like zero connections in this industry, but that's the one that I have, that my dad knows this guy. So very excited about that. But with that being said, we're going to jump right into my first prediction. I tried to not do all positive ones, so I have a lot of optimism for this coming year. So this is the more negative one. I think that we're going to see the Celtics suffer some early uncharacteristic losing. And I think people are going to freak out because that's what people do when it comes to the Celtics. And there's going to be questions around, this last year's team, were they more motivated because it was the first time? Maybe some individual players will be slumping. And I think there's going to be a lot of outrage, a lot of panic. And I think everything's going to end up being just fine. But the reason for that is because if you look at championship teams, generally speaking, the following year, they do experience some losing. And so that's just kind of what you can expect. They generally don't have as good of a record the following year. They might not even be the number one seed in the East. Who knows? So that's what I expect. I think people's expectations for the Celtics team are sky high, especially with every new Joe Mazzulla interview and Joe Mazzulla quote and, Jaylen Brown talking about running it back. I think people have been getting kind of fired up all summer, thinking that the Olympics also kind of motivated Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So I think people expect this team to come out from the jump and dominate and not really miss a beat. And I don't think that's going to happen just because I think there's human nature will play a part in it. but also just because other teams got better too, and other teams are really motivated as well and had much longer off seasons. And so I think it's going to result in some early losses. And with that, I guess I'll tie it into my prediction number 2, and that's that each of the starters will get some rest days early on. And so I think this is something that is maybe also going to surprise people, but Jayson Tatum, Derek White, and Drew Holiday all played in the Olympics. Obviously, not all of them got significant minutes. Jayson Tatum got the fewest. Drew Holiday got the most. But it doesn't really matter because once you're available to play, you're going through practices, you're going through shoot around, you're staying in shape, you're working out regularly. You're not taking the time off to just rest, which is what they were going to do for at least a few weeks. Otherwise, like Tatum literally went from signing his contract to going to, Vegas, to continuing on, traveling the world. So it just takes a toll on you. And so I think that Joe Mazzulla and the Celtics coaching staff, they've really shown that they're willing to rest guys and that they're going to prioritize rest and recovery, even if it means potentially dropping a few games. And so obviously I don't want to diminish the value of having the best record in the league. I think it really helped the Celtics that they had home court advantage throughout the entire playoffs and that they had that big buffer that they were able to rest players in the spring because they had pretty much already locked down the number 1 seed. But even so, we're going to see guys get rest days. I think even guys that didn't play for the Olympic team, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, they're going to get rest days because they played through June, and hopefully will play through June again. So that gives them another opportunity to do so. So yeah, that's what I expect. I think Al Horford already gets his rest days that are kind of worked into the schedule. The second nights of back-to-backs. If you follow this team at all, he doesn't play unless he's not going to play the first night and play the second night instead. He's going to be 38 next year, actually 39 going into the postseason. And so, yeah, Al is somebody that I think is going to get even more rest next season than we were even, used to seeing. And especially with Porzingis out, that might be a little bit more consequential than we're used to. So I guess those are 2 of my more negative predictions, though I don't think that either of those things are particularly negative because some early losing and rest days are both kind of parts of the game, especially when you're coming off of a championship. And so we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown are both going to be so adamant about not getting rest days because they want to have these great individual seasons and they're going to feel like they had some rest, especially Jaylen. It's going to be a few solid months. But I think it's one of those things that ultimately the coaching staff's going to kind of overrule. And yeah, I'm going to go to my third predictions. I have 10 overall that I made about the 2024-2025 season. Another slightly negative one. We're working our way up here, so bear with me. I think Jayson Tatum is going to struggle a little bit early on with his shot. I think we're going to see a little bit of spillover from the postseason shooting struggles and the Olympic shooting struggles, in which he famously didn't make a jump shot, very limited sample size. He shot 28.3% from 3 in the playoffs last year, but shot 37.6% from 3 for the season. So it's not like he struggled all year, and definitely had some hot stretches there as well. But I would not be surprised if he comes into the season and his rhythm is a little bit off. One, because I think he's been resting, deservedly so, because he obviously played through July, and 2, I think just because he obviously was in somewhat of a shooting funk in the Olympics, in the playoffs, and while I do believe that he'll figure it out, it might just take a little bit of time, and it might take a little bit of kind of playing with confidence and within the Celtics system and within rhythm. So again, I know that the narratives, the speculation is going to be loud when that happens. I'm sure that everybody's going to freak out, but he has shown already that even when his shot is off, he can be very, very effective. And so, again, that can be an asset because you realize how much he can do other things, how he can defend, how he can rebound, how he can play make. All of that was on display in the playoffs last season. But you wanted to figure out his shooting struggles because ultimately his shooting struggles are what what could potentially plague him down the road. And you don't want to get to the point where teams aren't respecting his shot. They're guarding him differently. You don't want it to escalate there. And I think there is quite a ways to go. I don't think anybody wants to see him shoot open shots just yet. But if this continues for too long, then all of a sudden he can start getting guarded differently. And that's when you start to see the mental struggles really amount. And so, you don't want like Russell Westbrook, Draymond Green treatment as far as leaving guys open and kind of challenging them to shoot, because then, it just hurts anybody's confidence. But I do think he's going to figure it out. And I think that when it's all said and done and you look at his 3-point numbers for next season, they're going to be comparable to last year's, comparable to his career's. Again, last year it was 37.6%. So it's not like, that's a very respectable number for a player that does so many things. And I think that he's going to end up somewhere around that as well. So we're going to move to a slightly more positive one. This is an Al Horford prediction. I don't know if you all have seen, Al Horford is currently in the Dominican Republic with Joe Mazzulla, with assistant coach Tony Dobbins, and with his family, his wife and 4 kids, I believe, with the Larry O'Brien Trophy. And so this is super cool. I'm actually working on a story on Al in the Dominican Republic, so I'll have more on that coming in the next few days. But Al is currently, in his home country. He lived in the DR until he was 14, moved to Michigan, where his father was located. His father, a former NBA player, Tito Horford, to pursue a basketball career. First it was a college basketball career, and then obviously it ended up being a very decorated NBA career. And the cool thing for Al is that he is the first ever NBA player from the Dominican Republic to win a championship. So he's just kind of making history by being there with the trophy. It's not something the country's ever experienced. I think some people know Al is also the highest paid Latin American player ever in the NBA. So his career earnings are higher than any other Latin American players that play professional basketball. And so he's really a legend in the DR, and the fact that he's able to be there with his family, and the fact that he has coaches and obviously people that he's very close to, in Joe Mazzulla and Tony Dobbins there as well, I think is very special. So more coming out of that soon, but my prediction as it relates to Al is that he is going to continue to show minimal signs of aging. And you might wonder, eventually, it has to catch up for him. I think you're right. I think eventually it will. I don't think that he's there yet. And I felt, maybe I was in the minority in this, but I felt like at times when he had, bad shooting games or when he struggled a little bit, it was seen as like, okay, the age has caught up to Al Horford, or like the miles have caught up to him, where I think that they were more like Jayson Tatum struggles. Like he just lost his confidence and rhythm a little bit, and obviously bounced back. He ended up shooting 47.8% from the field for the for the playoffs last year, and 36.8% from 3 for the playoffs. So shot 36.8% from 3, 41.9% from 3 during the regular season, and 51% from the field during the regular season. So those are all very good shooting numbers. Obviously, he does, shooting is not his biggest thing, and he had his big shooting games that made a huge impact in the playoffs, including becoming the oldest NBA player to ever hit 7 threes, I believe. But then he also showed us defensively that he can still make a huge impact, and was able to play really heavy minutes throughout the playoffs. I mean, Porzingis went down, and I think one of the things that's going to probably never be fully appreciated is the fact that Al Horford was able to step into that role to do what he did. And there was really not a significant drop-off. Obviously, there's things that Porzingis can do that Al Horford can't, and you saw those for the, when Porzingis came back for those 2 games. But he was really the unsung hero in a lot of ways, and I know he's a fan favorite and everybody loves and respects Al. But even so, you see the fact that, there was not a drop-off considering his age, considering he's on a much smaller contract than the other starters. He really shoulders an important load. And I don't think that we really saw much decline from him last year. I think that we talked a lot about it because the numbers, the age is there and the age is adding up. But until we see visibly, like he's starting to deal with injuries, with soreness, with things that are keeping him out of games, like he just hasn't had to deal with that yet. And when we've asked him about it, he said, like, you guys are, he's pretty much said this, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but like, you guys always ask me about age. But really, like, I feel great and I take good care of my body and I've learned how to do this. And to me, it's not about age, and so I think that the media obsession, and I'm fully responsible. I asked him about age after they won the Eastern Conference Finals last year. And I think he actually said that in response to one of my questions. But I think that he and the rest of the team just view him as an asset of this team moving forward. I love going to events right now. It's football season. I love going to football games, concerts, really any events. Living in Boston, you can just put in any event into the Game Time app, and you can get the best prices guaranteed. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So all you have to do is figure out what it is you want to attend. For example, I'm looking right now to get tickets for my family for opening night for the Celtics. So I can search that game in, browse through the seats on Game Time Picks. I can already see there's lots of great deals. There are super deals, different tiers of deals. And basically, as I'm looking, I'm able to actually see what the actual perspective of the court is from that particular seats. I have to make sure I don't want to get them seats that are in the balcony that are too far away. I can see what the court view is going to look like from those seats. So that way I'm able to choose without just looking at a seat number, which maybe doesn't mean anything to me. I'm able to see right away that this is a seat that I want to buy for my family members for opening night, so that they can see the ring ceremony and the banner raising and all that fun stuff. So Game Time Picks makes curation much easier. It makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. It's all in pricing, so you can use this feature to see the total upfront price. So there's no fees at the checkout. So the price that it says is the price that it is. You get the panoramic view. You get a lowest price guarantee for Game Time. So if you find a lower price elsewhere, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And there's Game Time ticket coverage. So your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. So just keeping track here, I've made 4 predictions so far. 1, Celtics will suffer some early losses. We will see each of the starters get some rest days. We'll see Jayson Tatum struggle with the shot early on, but ultimately figure it out. And then number 4, Al Horford will continue to show minimal signs of aging. So those are 4 so far. I think the next one that I'll go into is someone who I think is going to have the best season of his career. And there's a couple of potential candidates for this, but I think it's going to be Jaylen Brown, who obviously is coming off of an Eastern Conference Finals MVP and a Finals MVP trophy. Last year, he averaged 23 points on 49.9% shooting, shot 35.4% from 3 and 70.3% from the free throw line. So we all know, any Celtics fan knows that when you think about weaknesses in Jaylen's game, the thing that stands out the most, I think, at this point is the free throw shooting. He was like 66% from the line during the postseason, and kind of turned it around, because I think he was like below 50% or something at one point. So it's definitely a point of weakness for him, or at least it can be. And I would not be surprised if we see a noticeable improvement in that facet in his game moving forward. And for someone who gets to the line as often as he does, it makes a huge difference. You don't want to see him be unable to kind of convert those free points, right? They're called free throws for a reason. And the reason I'm so confident in Jaylen Brown's ability to make a leap in that regard, and just, in all aspects, because I do think we've seen him get better and better, is that he's a player that has gotten better every single year of his career. If you go through his years in the NBA with the Celtics, he's literally gotten better every single year. And I think that although he was all NBA the previous season and wasn't last year, I don't think that's a reflection of any drop off in his game. I felt like he was a miss. He was a snub from last year's roster. And it really was a result of him only averaging 23 points per game, whereas he averaged like 26 something points per game the previous season. And so I don't think that's a reflection of, it's just a reflection of there being more talent on the team, really. Wouldn't be surprised if we see him score more than 23 points a game this year, because he struggled a little bit at the beginning of last season when you had Porzingis join the team. I remember the think pieces. I remember the dialogue around Jaylen Brown, and is there room for him on this team? Is he going to fit in, or is he the guy? Is he the odd guy out? He had just signed the supermax. Lots of hysteria, and obviously he more than figured it out, and ultimately ended up being, by some regards, the most valuable player on the roster. And so I think he's going to continue that growth. You look at his history, you look at his track record. There's no reason to think that he's not going to continue improving. And I would imagine that free throws is something that really bothers him. If you're a very competitive basketball player and you think about your points and your team's points and your output, knowing you missed so many free throws has to be incredibly frustrating. And I can just say, being at shoot around and at practices, watching Jaylen work out during the playoffs, like, it was very obvious that he was trying to get better at that, at that, they were reenacting free throws with the sound effects. They were having coaches line up with him when he was shooting. They were having, like the same sound effects you'd hear at different arenas, both home and away, to really simulate real game environments. And so he was working at it. That's just from what we saw. I'm sure there was a lot more going on behind the scenes. And I do think that we're going to see some of the fruits of that work next season, just because I think in the past there was the ball handling leap, there was the playmaking leap, defensive leaps, just scoring and becoming more efficient in general. And I think this is the one area that still kind of remains an obvious weakness. So I think he has the best season of his career individually. And I think that we're going to see an improvement, particularly from free throw shooting, which has obviously been a big weakness for him. So moving on to my sixth prediction. This is where we start to get a little bit more niche as far as the players that we're talking about. This is, and again, all of these that can be totally wrong. Like I might literally go over 10. So I'm not saying that these are the gospel or anything like that, but just wanted to put my predictions out there just in case people want to hold me accountable. And maybe I get a lot of these right, and then I can pat myself on the back. And in any case, just wanted to record an episode and talk to you all. We're just 2 weeks away from media day. So Porzingis is going to be out in the fall. We don't know exactly when. So I guess these are actually two predictions. So for one, I think that he's going to come back earlier than expected. I talked to Brad Stevens about this in Vegas. And it honestly sounded from that conversation like he was maybe going to eye like a January return. Most of what I've seen is his timeline is like 5 to 6 months from the actual surgery, which was in July. And so, or actually, sorry, I think the surgery was in June. So that would bring him out to like a November return. And initially, that's what I thought. And then from talking to Brad, it looked like it was going to be longer. But we're seeing him working out. We're seeing him shooting. We're seeing him in the gym. And they're going to be really careful. But if he's healthy and, they already missed 20 games without him, like I think they're going to end, he's going to play. Especially if it's the kind of thing where it's like, it's fixed. I think with the calf injury in the playoffs, it was like, you knew that it could lead to another injury, which maybe it did. I don't know if these two injuries are confirmed related, but they certainly seem like they could be because when you're playing with a calf strain, just throws everything out of whack. But I don't know that this is the kind of injury that is going to be able to keep him out too long, ultimately, because if he's feeling 100% and he's made the full recovery, are the chances of re-injury high? Again, if this is such a rare injury that it's hard to, there's not like a long track record that I can look at the way that you might look at other things. But I think he might surprise some people, and I can't wait for that game. I can't wait to be in the building and see him come into the Garden and all the energy there. I don't know that they're going to be able to emulate the feeling that was in that building last season last playoffs when he came back in the finals and it was like a WWE type entrance, and it was just super cool. And I don't know that we're going to be able to ever have that kind of energy again because that's the NBA Finals and with one of your best players in your big trade acquisition, coming back from missing pretty much the entire playoffs. But there will be a similarly excited energy in the building when he comes back next year, especially since people are going to be seeing him on the bench probably for weeks before actually he makes that return. So I guess prediction number 6 is that he'll come back earlier than expected. And prediction number 7 is that Neemias Queta is going to play an important role there in the time where he's gone. And again, could be totally wrong. Maybe he doesn't even check in. It's possible, right? But Al Horford's going to get his rest days. And so that leaves you with 3 bench players that are proven and serviceable. And that Joe Mazzulla, believes that they have some sort of role because they were all re-signed this offseason. And that's Xavier Tillman, Luke Cornett, and Neemias Queta. And each of them have the things that they're good at. Obviously you have kind of 2 lob threats. Cornett and Queta can both be lob threats. Tillman, not as much. You have Tillman, who probably from a shooting aspect has the higher ceiling, or at least he's been encouraged to shoot. Biggest mystery for me remains why Luke Cornett doesn't ever shoot threes, but that's neither here nor there. But Tillman has that advantage potentially of stretching the floor. Queta, I will say, watched him shoot around a lot last year. I like his shot. I think it looks, he has good, he has good form, he has good rhythm. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts shooting threes this year and that we see that he can actually make them at a fair clip. So my prediction is that we're going to see some increased minutes for him in October and November in those months where Porzingis is out. And that he actually might stand out of those 3 guys. Obviously, last year, he was at the bottom of the rotation when it came to those 3 backup bigs. But I wouldn't be surprised if that actually switches this year and he actually gets an increased role, especially because I think they're going to want to take it easy on Tillman, who has some knee stuff, and Cornette, who they're going to want in the playoffs as well. And he's had like some random nick and neck injuries, like the calf strains and things. So I wouldn't be surprised if Queta, he's young, he's athletic, eats up some minutes early on and actually shows why they signed him to a multi-year deal and why they really converted his contract in the middle of last season. So again, all speculation here, but I've heard good things from talking to people about the hope and the optimism for Neemias Queta. And also at Summer League, he only played a couple of games, but he looked really good. And when we talked to DJ McClay at Summer League and we asked him about kind of what he was doing out there, what the priorities were, one of the big goals for Summer League for the Celtics was making sure that he was practicing different defenses that he would see during the regular season. And so they had Queta on there and they almost had everybody else playing the role. And obviously wins weren't coming first. But the advantage of all that was that he was getting important reps in, because I do think defensively his ceiling is really high. So it's just a question of whether he is able to really come to fruition defensively and reach that ceiling, and figure out some of the things that are more difficult schematically from a defensive lens. And he just has less experience than some other players, right? So we'll see. He's somebody, again, I really like, I'm optimistic about, think that he can give you a lot, just his motor. The way that he follows the shots, it kind of reminds me of like an Angel Reese type motor, where he's just able to be kind of relentless with the ball, and you see who he's battling with, who he's banging in the paint with, and you're like, how is he continuing to get his own misses? And I know people clown on it. I know people say like, oh, Angel Reese is only breaking rebounding records because she's missing all of her shots. And it's like, one, that's not true. It's already been shown that she's a good rebounder. But I think in general, people underestimate the value of being able to pursue your own misses and how impressive that can be. So anyways, all that to say, Neemias Queta, I think he's going to surprise people and carve out a real bench role. Okay, so I got 3 more predictions here. Number 8 is that we're not going to see the rookies hardly at all. And I know people are always disappointed about that because everybody loves to see rookies play. But Lonnie Walker, actually, I'll hold up on Lonnie Walker, but Baylor Shireman and Anton Watson both were drafted last year, Baylor being the first round pick, Anton being the second round pick. I would say from Summer League, Anton actually seemed more NBA ready. And I think that the position that he plays, which is, more of a post player, there's a little bit less proven players on that, in that spot. Obviously, I just named 3 of them, but even so, like, I think Baylor Shireman's competing with Sam Hauser, and with obviously this Jaylen and Jayson. But I don't think we're going to see either of the rookies play a whole lot this season. I think this is a really deep team, and they're going to, neither of them looked spectacular. Neither of them looked like ready to just go. Anton looked really good defensively, but both of them, I could see obvious areas in their game that could be a challenge, starting an NBA play on a championship team where you have very little room for error. And so I think we're going to see both of those guys up in Maine a lot next season. And I'm going to be up in Maine a lot. I actually looked at my calendar, and I figured out what days I'm going to be in Maine and what days I'm going to be in Boston, and then what days I'm going to be on the road, because I am going to be in more than half of the away games, hopefully this season. And so we have a lot going on, but I'll be in Maine a lot. I'll be reporting on Baylor and Anton and everybody else up there. But I don't think we're going to see either of them play a whole lot. Obviously maybe spot minutes here or there, maybe in blowouts, or maybe they come on a road trip and get an opportunity. I think they'll score some points here and there, but I don't think we're going to see either of them become like rotation players. I would love to be wrong, because I think it'd be fun to see a rookie get in the mix. And obviously we haven't had that for quite a few years. I'm thinking, between Jordan Walsh and JD Davison, it's been, a lot of guys getting drafted and going up to Maine. So we'll see if they can break that mold. Clearly the front office is comfortable doing that. I don't think Jordan Walsh showed us that he's ready for NBA minutes, so I expect he'll be in Maine for most of the season as well, bearing any major changes. And then JD Davison, I don't really know what the plan is, honestly, because he's on his third two-way, someone I'm really high on in theory. I think he has a lot of promise as a guard, but just a really tough as an undersized guard that's not a great shooter to make it in this league. And he is that, and he's also playing behind a guy, Peyton Pritchard, who I think is just better than him in most regards. And so it's just going to be hard for him to eat any of his minutes if he comes to Boston. So no minutes for the rookies. That is my prediction number 8. And I got 2 more here. This one might be like just me hoping more than it is accurate. I think Lonnie Walker makes the 15-man roster. That's prediction number 9 for me. I know the Celtics like to keep a spot open. So whether that means that something else happens or some other transaction that clears out an additional spot, we'll see. But I don't believe that Lonnie Walker signed this deal, joins this roster, comes to Boston, coming off of a year where he was basically averaging nearly double figures, and he's been very serviceable throughout his career in the NBA, all to play for training camp and then go up to Maine. I don't think that's going to be the case because I just can't imagine that there's no team that would have given him a guaranteed spot. And maybe the reality is that he just played his cards wrong. Everybody's roster's filled up, and then now he kind of came in a panic. And Derek White talked to the front office and got him all hooked up. I don't know, but we'll see. We'll have some reporting on that. I'm working on a feature on Lonnie, so that's in the works as well. But yeah, I think he's gonna make the roster because I think that there's some sort of guarantee or assurance that that's going to happen. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks, your picks are still alive. So right now, if you're watching games, if you're watching basketball, different sports, the injury insurance thing, that can be a lot of fun. That has already benefited me in the past as well. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. So yeah, I think Lonnie Walker is going to make the roster. And I think he's going to contribute, honestly. I think if he makes this roster and they pay the extra luxury tax dollars that accompanies his salary and they lose that flexibility of having an open spot to sign a player of need, then I think it's because they think he can impact the team right away and actually play. I don't think they would do all that if he's going to be buried on the bench, not playing at all. And again, this is a player that a lot of people thought was going to warrant a multi-year deal, more than a minimum, that the Celtics weren't going to be able to get without giving up something pretty significant. And the fact that he kind of falls in their lap, I know there's been a lot of reporting about how, this is not a guarantee and that he very well might not make the roster. And I get why, because obviously, they like to leave the 15th spot open. I mean, Brad Stevens literally said that to me at Summer League when I asked about who Shaper said. But even so, I do think that he has a skill set, an offensive skill set, and the ability to create his own shot that's going to make a big difference, and that is ultimately going to help this team get over the hump and do it again. And that kind of bleeds into my 10th and last prediction. And that's that the Celtics are going to win the 2025 NBA championship, and that they'll become the first team to go back-to-back since the Warriors did it in 2018. And I don't like to predict championships, and I didn't want to say it too much last year just because I do think so much has to go right, and I cannot emphasize that enough. So much has to go right for a team to do it. You have to see, health throughout the year. You have to see individual guys have great years. Just because a team was great one year doesn't mean that they'll be great the following year, because things change, circumstances change, individual circumstances and conditions change. One locker room can have 0 issues and you change out a couple things and all of a sudden maybe you do have issues, right? So there's the Olympic stuff. Like, there's a lot of reasons why things could feel different. But I watched Joe Mazzulla's interview on Locked On Celtics with John Corrales. I know this team. I love that they re-signed everybody on this roster, with a couple of exceptions, obviously Sevilla and O'Shea being the 2 players that didn't come back. And I think that everybody's in their prime and is only going to get better. I mean, probably the only 2 players that aren't slated, projected to get better based on age are Al Horford and Drew Holiday. And I don't think that either of them are going to see a significant decline at all this year. Drew looked great in the Olympics. Al looked great throughout the playoffs last year. And as I already mentioned, I don't think that he's shown us signs of aging. And so with that, I really do believe that the Celtics are poised to win this 2025 championship as much as any other team has been poised to be back-to-back winners. And it's really, really hard to be back-to-back. Teams, I actually just recently saw the teams that won a championship. No team has even made the conference finals the following year in years now. And so clearly, like, there's a track record in this league. There's a lot of parity. There's a lot of stars. There's a lot of great players. There's a lot of teams that could also win this year. I think the Nuggets could win. You can't count out Dallas because they literally were there last year, and I think we'll be better is what my expectation is. You have a new big three that's assembled in Philadelphia with the addition of Paul George. You have the Knicks that obviously are going to be loaded with talent and already showed so much promise last season. The Thunder were the number 1 seed last year. I think they'll have the best record in the league this year. That's another prediction, I guess, is number 11. And I love that they added Caruso and Hardenstein to that team. I think it makes them even more formidable. And I felt like Josh Giddey just wasn't a good fit there anyways. So, yeah, and I'm sure I'm missing like a bunch of other potential contenders. So, point being is that there's a lot of teams that could win this year. But I do think this team gets it done. Again, I think that they found the formula to success. And that they're not riding on one player having an incredible, insane year. And that's where sometimes you can get in trouble is when you're relying on, Nikola Jokic to do the undone and Jamal Murray to have game winners every night. Like you don't want to rely on like that level of individual greatness. And I think this team is constructed to not rely on any one guy to go off and explode and have an unreal year. Everybody can have a good year and they can get it done. The question, obviously is going to come down to health in the postseason. I even think that they can afford to have guys miss some time during the regular season. But you can't have your big guys, your main guys miss time in the playoffs. And they've been really lucky, knock on wood. Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, they've been really healthy, reliable, available players. Porzingis remains the question mark. But again, I always believed last year that they had enough to win without him. And proved me right. So obviously I don't want to diminish his contributions in that postseason run. But certainly we were able to see that this team had enough in the tank even when he wasn't available. And he was huge in those 2 games in the wins, but they were able to get it done without him. So with all that being said, those are my 10 Celtics predictions for the 2024-2025 season. You can let me know what your predictions are in the comments. As I mentioned, interviewing Peyton Pritchard's college coach next week. So if you have any specific questions you'd like asked about what Pritchard was like as an Oregon Duck, feel free to send a message, DM me on Twitter, usually the best place to find me. And we'll see if we can work the question into our interview. Really excited for that. And then, if you follow along, subscribe to the show with You Got Boston, subscribe on YouTube. If you're watching this on CLNS, I also have my own YouTube channel, so feel free to subscribe there so you don't miss any episodes. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, check out the other content on CLNS Media and CLNS Celtics All Access. As I mentioned, last year was my first year on the Celtics beat. This year, I'm covering sports basketball full-time, covering the WNBA and the Celtics. And so I will be at every game, every practice, and a bunch of the away games as well, on the road, following this team and kind of giving you all the behind-the-scenes stories and videos, and obviously this show. And I'm also going to have some fan engagement. So we will have fans join the show at various points, still working all that out. But again, I promise this, I'm not just saying that. It's something that I've been mulling over and thinking about how to do in the most kind of cohesive way. So with all that, thank you all so much for watching or listening. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, send to your friends, leave a like, a comment, a review. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. And we will be going live again on Sunday for You Got Boston Sunday mailbag. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.